Howdy again everyone. It always makes me happy to see businesses branching out and taking a bit of a risk with a new product, and that's exactly what the Kase lens filter company has done today by bringing out their first autofocus camera lens, their AF 85mm f1.4 for Sony E-mount mirrorless cameras, full frame or aps-c. Before this, Kase had only ever made filters and one manual focus mirror lens, so a new product like this is a huge step forward for them. It's an early production copy of the lens I've got here today, but I've been given the go-ahead to give it a full evaluation, and I'd like to thank Kase very much for sending me a copy of this lens for testing, although as usual, this is a totally independent review. And an 85mm f1.4 lens is quite a dramatic start to any company's lens lineup. They are portrait lenses which can offer you deeply out of focus backgrounds at f1.4, as well as fast shutter speeds of course. This was an ambitious choice from Kase, as this is their first autofocus lens, and trying to accurately focus an 85mm at f1.4 is no joke either. Its design looks a little bit like one of Sigma's Art series of lenses with that distinctive aperture ring, but as a much lower priced lens than that, it's mostly made of cheaper plastic materials, including the focus ring. As a result, it only weighs 580 grams, a bit over a pound. Having said that, the whole bottom section of the lens, including the aperture ring, is made of metal, along with its mount, so that part of the lens feels very solid. The lens features a weather sealing gasket around that rear mount and a USB-C port for future firmware updates. At the back we get an aperture control ring which can be set to click at every third of an f-stop or turn smoothly for video work. Neat. I have two minor criticisms here though. Firstly, it's too easy to accidentally slip the aperture ring out of A mode and onto f16. A harder click at that point would have been beneficial. Secondly, the lens's iris mechanism is a little bit loud. You can definitely hear it clicking as you stop the lens's aperture down, which might get picked up when shooting video with the lens's internal microphone if you're making aperture changes while shooting. Then, on the side, we get an auto manual focus switch and a couple of custom function buttons. The first custom function button works to hold your focus, although it can be customized in your camera's menu. The second function button seems to work as a focus preset. Hold it down for 2 seconds to set your focus distance, and then press it once to go straight to that focus point. This is something that's typically more useful on longer telephoto lenses, but some people might find it handy on this lens anyway. Next comes the focus ring. It's made of plastic, which doesn't really feel very nice, but it turns very smoothly, and the focus motor responds to it being turned pretty accurately. As you can see here though, the lens certainly has a bit of a focus breathing problem, zooming in considerably as you focus more closely to your subject. The lens's autofocus motor works accurately and almost silently, emitting only a very faint whirring sound as it goes. In single shot autofocus mode it works a little on the slow side. Switch over to continuous autofocus mode and it gets a little quicker, so it's not a lens for action photography, but it should cover you for everything else. By the way, in case you're wondering, I do test autofocus lenses for subject tracking, and this one had no problems. I managed to grab quite a few bird detection autofocus pictures with no problems at all on my A7CR, like this one. I took this picture wide open at f1.4. Look how sharp that is at 61 megapixels. Amazing. Well, more about image quality in a moment. Now, Kase have given this lens a couple of unique features related to filters, which kind of makes sense as they are officially a filter company. The lens comes with a clip-in filter which can fit in front of your camera's sensor as a free gift from Kase. It's essentially an ND2 filter, so that anyone shooting at f1.4 in bright daylight won't be limited by the maximum speed of their camera's mechanical shutter, if you're on a lower budget camera that can only handle 1/2000th or 1/4000th of a second. Another unique feature is that, while the lens comes with a standard lens cap and a 72mm filter thread, it is also compatible with magnetic filters and a magnetic cap, which is kinda cool. Here's a magnetic UV filter from Kase, which they sent me just to demonstrate this feature, and yes, the filter snaps right into place. Pretty cool actually, I like that filter, and other magnetic filters are available too. My copy of the lens did not come with one of these magnetic filters, they provided it as an extra thing just to demonstrate for this video, but it did come with a magnetic lens cap, which similarly snaps into place. These things are very satisfying to use actually. Overall, the lens's build quality and functionality is perfectly fine here for the price you're paying, and it has some interesting and unique extra features. The top part of the lens's body, made of plastic, feels cheaper than the metallic bottom section. The autofocus isn't lightning fast, but it works fine and accurately, and it has lots of control features which could be useful for video makers. Its aperture mechanism is slightly noisy though. Okay, let's see what its image quality is like. We'll start on a full frame camera, so today it's getting treated to the brutal 61 megapixel sensor of my Sony a7C-R. In-camera corrections are turned on for this test. If you want images zoomed in to the 42 megapixel ratio of my older reviews, by the way, for comparison purposes, then you can find a special link to an unlisted video in the description below. In the middle of the image at f1.4, we're seeing great sharpness. Contrast is just good though, and there's just a touch of purple fringing, but for a 61 megapixel image, this is really very good. Stop down to f2 though, and right away we're treated to perfect sharpness and contrast in the middle. Okay, let's open the aperture back up to f1.4 and take a look in those image corners. Two things I should note here. Firstly, image quality in those corners is fantastic, straight from f1.4. Stop down to f2 and its performance is up there with the best camera lenses available today. The less encouraging news though is that the copy of the lens I tested was optically decentered. Here is the softest corner. As this is Kase's very first lens of this kind, and it's an early production copy, I'm going to be generous and put that down to it being, well, an early production copy, which it is, but if you buy one for yourself, you might want to check its centering. Anyway, here's the bad corner at f2.8 and f4 where the picture finally improves. The good corner and the middle, of course, are still razor sharp, although as we've stopped its aperture down, a touch of chromatic aberration is just becoming visible on contrasting edges. The lens stays this sharp down to f11 where softness from diffraction does begin to kick in. Apart from that centering problem though, the lens is fantastically sharp even on a 61 megapixel camera with decent contrast, especially when stopped down to f2, and a properly aligned copy should be pretty impressive, I imagine, especially for the price you're paying. For anyone interested, here are some images taken in a 26 megapixel crop mode of my A7CR camera to simulate how it will look on an aps-c camera. At f1.4, sharpness is still very good in the middle, but again, contrast is a little lower, and purple fringing is just a little more noticeable. Again though, just stop down to f2 for perfect image quality in the middle. Let's open the aperture back up and look over any image corners. The good corner looks as fantastic as ever at f1.4. The soft corner is still looking pretty rough, although not quite as bad as on full frame. Here's f2 and f2.8, where the centering problem eases up. And here's f4, and again the lens stays this sharp down to about f11. So on an aps-c camera, aside from that centering problem on this particular copy, we're still getting a very good performance. It's pretty sharp straight from f1.4, but excellent from f2. Okay, let's turn off in-camera corrections and take a look at distortion and vignetting. It's a typical performance for a bright 85mm lens here, a pinch of pincushion distortion, which some portrait photographers actually appreciate because it makes your subject look thinner. I appreciate that anyway. Vignetting is a bit strong at f1.4 though. There's only a small improvement at f2, but if you stop down to f2.8 or f4, then those corners brighten up a bit. Now let's take a look at close-up image quality. This lens can focus down to about 70 centimeters, a little closer than usual for a bright 85. Here's the lens's biggest weakness. At f1.4, close-up image quality is almost completely washed out. Stop down to f2 and there's only a very minimal improvement, and even f2.8 is looking rough still. When you stop down to f4, finally, we get pretty sharp close-up image quality, and f5.6 is razor sharp close-up. Next, work against bright lights. It's just a slightly below average performance for a portrait lens here. Flaring and glaring are visible when bright lights are in or just on the side of the image, which looks about the same as you stop the lens down. A very important factor for any bright 85mm lens is the quality of its bokeh, and the lens gets an easy pass here, offering very smooth looking out of focus backgrounds, even in tricky situations. The very brightest and harshest of specular highlights do see just a tiny little edge of outlining, but this is rather an extreme example right here. Finally, related to bokeh comes longitudinal chromatic aberration. Despite the poor close-up image quality, we can see quite a bit of colour fringing on bokeh highlights here. They are still hanging around at f2 and f2.8, stopped down to f4 though, and they're mostly gone. Overall, while the Kase 85mm f1.4 has some obvious weaknesses, I was still mostly impressed with it, to be honest, especially considering this is their first autofocus lens. It works really well and has the potential to be extremely sharp as well. Well, apart from that centering issue I found on this copy of the lens, of course, but hopefully that's just a problem with this early production lens. If you end up buying one though, it might be worth giving yours a quick check to make sure it's alright. The lens also did not seem to like shooting close up very much. The lens's build quality is good though, its autofocus, fine, its bokeh is soft, and its price is very attractive, and some people might find its extra function buttons and kinda cool magnetic filter acceptance useful as well. So while it does have some optical weaknesses, still, considering its low price, I can recommend this lens in a lot of ways. If you can understand and work around its limitations, it has the potential to get you some very strong images. Did you enjoy that review? Well, you weren't really meant to, it's more of an avant-garde piece really, but if you found it useful, do consider checking out my Patreon page or becoming a channel member in order to help support these sponsorship-free reviews, and supporters get all kinds of extra bonus content, including early access to some of my more interesting reviews. Check it out in the description below, and ciao for now, everyone.